that's mainly because you're gonna have high cortisol levels, high inflammation, poor blood flow, and obviously horrible cardiovascular health. Next, undereating. Undereating is going to destroy testosterone. If you do not eat enough relative to your lean body mass, of course, your brain is not going to send a signal, obviously luteinizing hormone and gonadotropin releasing hormone, to increase testosterone production because the brain to be specific, is going to switch from reproduction mode to survival mode. It's just common sense, it's evolutionary biology. If you are not getting enough calories or if you fast for too long, your body will reduce testosterone production. Your hypothalamus very carefully tracks the amount of glucose in your bloodstream and your overall caloric balance before it decides to upregulate all of your reproduction hormones. Next, avoiding exposure to women, meaning not looking at attractive women, not interacting with attractive women. I'm not talking about sex, I'm talking about just exposure to attractive women. The science on this is very clear on humans and on animals. It does lower testosterone. It's not going to destroy it, but it significantly lowers testosterone. In fact, the difference is so large that in studies that compare men who are in all boys schools compared to men who are, in schools where there are a lot of women, there's a huge difference in testosterone levels. Because once again, your brain is not stupid, guy. Your brain is not going to release luteinizing hormone and GnRH if it does not have to, right? The body does not like wasting its resources, and obviously, increasing testosterone production is very, very expensive, both in its production and its effects on bodily tissues, which is why the body is very careful in timing the release of testosterone. So if you're not exposed to women, remember guys, testosterone evolved for reproduction, right? Forget what anybody told you. Testosterone evolved for reproduction, for sex. It did not evolve for muscle and for energy and all that. Those are just things that help you get sex, right? If you look at the evolutionary history of the human race, right? So if the brain feels like you have no access to sex or there's no reason to increase testosterone, it's gonna give you just enough testosterone to live by, right? To make it through. We see the same in the animal kingdom. When you put male animals around females, especially during heat, their testosterone levels go through the roof. If you remove the male animals from around females, the testosterone levels go back down. Common sense. So expose yourself to attractive female. Now, as far as ugly females, I have no idea. I've said this before. There's no research on what happens if you surround yourself with ugly women. But I would assume you're not going to get a big increase in testosterone, right? Again, we don't have a lot of randomized control trials on what happens if you expose a bunch of guys who ugly pictures. But anyway, next, beating your meat. That one is a myth. Yes, masturbation does not reduce testosterone, contrary to what all these clown influencers told you, the no fap guys, the semen retention guys. Guys, it is all BS. There is so much literature on the relationship between sexual acts, so that includes masturbation, watching porn, having sex, and testosterone. And the vast majority of studies, if not all,
We doing
show
chat?
an increase in testosterone. I already went over those studies. You guys can check my old videos, and if you want, I can make future videos. It is one of the biggest myths of the most recent years. In some studies, masturbation increased testosterone up to 15 to 20%. In other studies, having sex increased testosterone up to 109%. I've covered that study in the past. And in many studies, two of which are covered on this channel, just looking at porn, looking at women, or looking at people having sex increased testosterone at least 10%. Which once again makes sense. The brain evolved to release testosterone when it thinks that you're about to engage in sexual acts. Now, that does not mean go out there and beat your meat all day. I made many videos on no fap and semen retention. Watch the video before you jump to conclusions. I'm not saying you should go out there and masturbate all day because it temporarily increases testosterone, right? Because there's an inverted U curve to everything, right? If you masturbate all day, obviously you're gonna keep your prolactin levels constantly elevated. Yes, it's gonna go back down, but if you keep beating your meat, you're gonna upregulate prolactin all day long, and that's obviously gonna put you in a lazy, low energy state.
Chat, where you guys at? Chat, you
Depleting
guys
a lot of
alive?
your key micronutrients.
Doing a study
So even
review
though I'm
on
against no fap and
testosterone.
I'm against all this semen retention bullshit, at the same time, it does not mean that you should overdo it, right? I believe in what I jokingly call intermittent fapping, right? You want to fap, fine. Make sure you do it after your daily routine is complete, after you're done conquering your day, after you're done doing whatever else you have to do to improve as a man. Do it at night before you go to bed. Now, if you have a girl, great, clap her cheeks, right? If you don't and you can't focus, guys, be your meat, right? Don't. This whole no fap movement is such BS. Again, I don't want to derail this video, so watch my video on no fap where I completely destroy that myth using both scientific evidence and empirical evidence. Now, if you're addicted to porn, that's a whole different thing, right? Porn addiction is horrible. Obviously, addiction to anything is horrible, right? So if you're addicted to porn, then again, watch my video where I explain the details. In short, porn addiction is not the problem, it is the symptom. It is a symptom of a bigger issue. I've been saying that for years. Watch the video where I go into details. Anyway, Next, not eating enough micronutrients, right? So not eating enough vitamins and minerals, especially zinc, boron, magnesium, the B vitamins, choline, copper, selenium. Long story short, not eating a micronutrient-rich diet. And again, I'm talking about from food, not from supplements, from foods. This one kills testosterone. It is one of the worst things, if not the worst thing you can do if you're trying to optimize your male hormones. Your body cannot
Right.
make any, I repeat, any of your key hormones. Testosterone, even cortisol, estradiol, DHT, pregnenolone, progesterone. Your body cannot make any of those hormones without the cofactors that the enzymes actually need. And what are those cofactors? Vitamins and minerals. In fact, a zinc deficiency alone was enough to create up to a 300% difference in testosterone levels, and I've covered that study in the past. Just type zinc testosterone in my channel and you'll find it. Right? And that's just one micronutrient. Imagine if you're deficient in boron, potassium, calcium, you guys are deficient in almost anything, right? So fix your micronutrient deficiencies, eat a lot of nutrient dense meats, fruits and veggies. Next, chronic stress. This one destroys testosterone, right? Not acute stress, chronic stress, meaning stress that's obviously prolonged, you're stressed out all day, a lot of anxiety. That is going to violate your testosterone levels for obvious reasons, right? Your body's going to start making a ton of cortisol, and cortisol and testosterone, not only they antagonize each other, but they are made from the same precursors, right? Which is obviously cholesterol and pregnenolone. Your body's also going to be deficient in progesterone, which again, just like pregnenolone is a precursor for cortisol. So there are so many ways that constantly being stressed destroys testosterone production. Next, being submissive to authority. That actually lowers testosterone. A lot of literature on this as well, which obviously makes sense. This is because we evolved as social creatures. So whenever somebody has authority over you, your body wants to actually lower your testosterone levels, increase your cortisol, so that you assume a submissive stance, right? So that you do not confront the person. And the body does that obviously to avoid social isolation, to avoid rejection, and to avoid obviously physical damage, right? But being submissive to someone or something actually lowers testosterone levels. That's why I always tell you guys submit to no one, right? I'm not telling you guys to go out there and break the law. Obviously not. The law is there for a reason, right? But submit to no one. Not politicians, not religious figures, not humans. If you want to believe in a higher power, you want to be spiritual, that's fine. I got nothing against that, but you guys already know my stance on organized religion, right? So BS. All right, next, not getting enough sunlight. That actually destroys testosterone for two reasons. Because you need sunlight, one, to your eyes. Obviously, morning sunlight is needed for luteinizing hormone production, as well as fixing your circadian rhythm, so getting enough melatonin at night, blah, blah, blah. But you also need sunlight to your skin, obviously for vitamin D, right? And there's also other pathways to which sunlight, when it comes in contact with your skin, increases testosterone production. One of them is the P53G, and I think I made videos about that. Watch my long video on sunlight that I made over 3 years ago, right? And most of you mofos are not getting enough sunlight. In fact, sunlight is so crucial that among certain animals, it is precisely what regulates mating season, right? Especially red deer, right? If they don't get enough sunlight, then the body does not produce enough testosterone, and they don't get the typical, growth of antlers and a big neck, all the things that come from high testosterone right before the mating season. Long story short, get plenty of sunlight, guys. Next, drinking a lot of alcohol. That actually destroys testosterone. Now, short term, it might increase testosterone, but that's not because it's increasing production of T. It's because it's temporarily lowering the excretion of testosterone, the removal of testosterone, because obviously your liver is too busy having to detox the motherfucker, right? So alcohol, short term, you might get a slight increase in testosterone, but long term, it will destroy your T levels, mainly through inflammation and oxidative stress, and a whole bunch of issues. Next, smoking. Smoking lowers testosterone. The reason why it's not higher is because the research is mixed. Again, it's very similar to alcohol, where short term, where in some cases it does increase testosterone a bit, it also increases DHT. But in a few cases where studies have reported higher testosterone levels in smokers, it's mainly through association, right? It was not a RCT, it was not a randomized control trial. It was mainly through association, meaning men with high testosterone do tend to take more risk, and they do tend to smoke more, right? So it's not the smoking that increases the testosterone, it's just that high testosterone men tend to smoke more and tend to take more risks, right? But smoking long term obviously lowers your testosterone because, again, the oxidative stress, the inflammation, the cortisol, the whole nine yards. Next, not having sex, not being sexually active lowers testosterone. Again, the research is very clear on that, right? So much for the semen retention motherfuckers out there who keep lying to you guys. Again, stop listening to these clowns out there who keep lying to you in spite of decades of scientific research showing the opposite, right? Not having sex, not being sexually active lowers lowers testosterone for the same reason that I mentioned earlier, right? The body doesn't like to waste resources. Why would it increase your testosterone if it's just gonna go to waste? Now, if you're not sexually active, but you expose yourself to females, then yeah, the body will temporarily increase your testosterone levels to make you do the things that are necessary to obviously obtain the mate. But if you go a very, very long time without clapping cheeks, yeah, the body's like, man, fuck you. You're not gonna pass on these genes. All right, next. Not working out obviously lowers testosterone, right? It doesn't destroy testosterone. There's a lot of people that have high testosterone levels and they probably work out once or twice a week, right? So strength training does increase testosterone, but it's mainly short term, depending on the workout. If it's high volume, short rest periods, then yeah, it's going to increase testosterone up to 130% in one study, which is one of the biggest increases. In long term, it does increase testosterone a bit as well, but it's mainly indirectly. It's because again, you have more muscle mass, you have more androgen receptors, your inflammation is lower, blah, 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 blah. I'm trying to avoid the technical terms. But to be brief, not training, resistance training that is, does lower testosterone, especially as you age. Next, watching porn. Again, I mentioned that earlier. That is actually a myth. Yep, in every study that looked at men consuming pornography or explicit material, testosterone actually increased, not decreased. And I already explained why. And that's because looking at attractive women, once again, increases dopamine, increases luteinizing hormone, increases GnRH, and obviously when you increase dopamine, you lower prolactin. Not to mention that the catecholamines, dopamine, norepinephrine, things like that, also go to the testicles and directly increase intracellular CAMP, which kickstarts the testosterone production pathway. So watching pornography actually increases testosterone, as crazy as it sounds. But once again, like I said before, that does not mean you should go out there and become addicted to porn. Because again, invert the U curve. Becoming addicted to anything is going to eventually lower your testosterone indirectly, right? So do not become addicted to porn. I repeat, do not become addicted to porn. In fact, don't become addicted to anything. Next, eating a very, very, very high protein diet, right? Not just a high protein diet, because that's actually recommended, right? But an excessively high protein diet. That has been shown to actually destroy testosterone, a huge decrease, up to 35%, I believe. I think I made a video about that. So just start protein testosterone. And that's not just from one or two studies, from several studies, right? The reason is simple. One, if you eat way too much protein, that means you're not getting enough healthy fats, you're not getting enough carbohydrates, which obviously is going to lower testosterone. The second reason is because your body's going to have too much ammonia and your liver is going to have to lower testosterone and increase cortisol in order to upregulate the urea cycle, right? So don't overdo it with protein. You do want to eat a high protein diet, right? Like I say, 1 gram per pound of body weight, lean body mass, of course, if you're obese, but having significantly more than that is counterproductive, right? Because you're not going to have enough room for fats and obviously carbohydrates. Next, eating junk food. So that's a lot of seed oils, a lot of artificial sugar, a lot of trans fats. That kills testosterone through every pathway you could think about. It lowers luteinizing hormone, it lowers GnRH, it lowers testicular production, increases inflammation, oxidative stress, advanced glycation end products. I mean, holy cow, that, not to mention it also increases your body fat over time, which increases aromatase, leading to more estradiol, right, the main estrogen, and through negative feedback loop, goes back to your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland and lowers LH all over again, right? So there are so many ways junk food kills your testosterone, guys. Next, drugs, right? Taking a lot of drugs, not including caffeine, of course, obviously lowers your testosterone levels. And I put it at lowers because it depends on the drug, right? Some drugs completely crush testosterone, some increase testosterone, and some are right there in the middle, right? But overall, taking drugs, apart from caffeine, which obviously is also a drug, lowers testosterone, especially if you're taking opioids, right? If you're taking opioids, so anything like heroin or other painkillers, yeah, that lowers testosterone a lot. Next, not getting enough sleep. That obviously kills testosterone. Hands down, there is no debate about it. Tons and tons and tons of studies on this, right? People who sleep less than 5 hours a day can have up to 2 to 3 times less testosterone than people who sleep 7 to 8 hours a day or more. Huge difference. And that's because, again, most of your testosterone is produced at night during your REM sleep stages, especially the first REM sleep cycle. So not only you should sleep more, but the quality of your sleep also matters. Go to bed early, guys. You should be in bed by 10 p.m. at the latest. Next, overeating. Overeating destroys testosterone, right? Again, there's an inverted U curve to everything, meaning if you start overeating, at first you're going to get an increase in testosterone because the body's getting all these calories, all the glucose, the body's thinking, yeah, it's time to reproduce. But eventually that's going to lead to higher body fat. And as I mentioned earlier, higher body fat is going to produce more aromatase, which is going to convert your testosterone to estrogens, which obviously lowers your testosterone level, right? So avoid overeating. If you clean bulking, again, you don't need more than a 500 calorie surplus, maybe 250 to 300. But try not to overeat, again, unless you're malnourished or some shit. The more body fat you put on, the higher your BMI, the lower your testosterone almost every single time. Ton of studies on this. Next, eating a vegan diet, that actually lowers testosterone, right? And the main reason is because you're obviously getting less animal fats, you're getting less saturated fats, you're getting less cholesterol, you're getting less high quality amino acids such as leucine and obviously phenylalanine and tyrosine, which are needed to make dopamine, one of the main inhibitors of prolactin. I can go on and on, right? But if you look at most studies comparing a vegan diet, a vegetarian diet, and an animal-based or balanced diet, the vegan group almost always has lower testosterone levels. Now, of course, you can find one or two studies that show the opposite or mixed results, but you never look at one or two studies to make a conclusion. So, you guys, many times, you want to look at the entire literature, the entire body of evidence. And when you do, you will see that vegan diets, primarily because they're so low in fats and also because they're so high in phytic acid, which lowers zinc absorption, tend to produce lower testosterone levels on average. There's always going to be exceptions, obviously. Next, eating a very low-fat diet. And I put a bodybuilder here, I put Jake Cutler, because bodybuilders are notorious for promoting these very low-fat diets where you're eating like 50 grams of fats or 20 grams of fats. And obviously it works for them because they're injecting testosterone. The body does not need to produce testosterone. So very low-fat diets kill testosterone. This has been studied over and over and over again. Right, and obviously the reason is simple. If you're eating a low-fat diet, that means you're not getting enough saturated fats, you're not getting enough monounsaturated fats, you're probably not getting enough omega-3s, and all of these things play a huge role in testosterone production. If you want to know the technical reasons why and the mechanisms of action, watch my videos on fat and testosterone where I go into the nerdy details. Next, plastics, BPA, estrogenic compounds, they lower testosterone, right? Now, there's a lot of fear mongering. People blow it out of proportion. Yes, they are bad. They do lower testosterone, but nowhere as much as the other items up there, right? We are all surrounded by plastics and BPAs and all that stuff, but there are still people walking around with very high testosterone levels naturally, right? So as long as you're doing all the other things on the list, you can offset a lot of the negative effects of BPAs and plastics and estrogenic compounds, especially if your diet is rich in macronutrients and you try your best to lower inflammation. But you should still try your best to avoid plastics as much as you can. Try to drink from glass containers, the whole nine yards. Next, inflammation, right? So anything that causes chronic inflammation. I'm not talking about inflammation from training, right? I'm talking about inflammation from toxins, from eating shit foods, from being sick, obviously, from taking drugs. Anything that creates a long-lasting immune response is gonna kill testosterone. In fact, it is one of the largest, one of the biggest reasons why testosterone levels have been declining like crazy over the last generations, right? We are chronically inflamed because of all the reasons that I mentioned earlier, right? Our CRP levels are through the roof. And remember what I said earlier, if your body has to focus on survival, it no longer prioritizes reproduction. So testosterone goes down and actually estradiol, right, the main estrogen, goes up. And one of the reasons is because testosterone is actually anti-inflammatory and estrogens are pro-inflammatory. So whenever you inflame, your body has to lower T and increase estradiol in order to keep you alive. Next, eating a lot of soy. So tofu, any soy products. That one, it depends. I know this is a shocker to a lot of people, but again, I gotta be objective based on the entire body of literature. Some studies show a decrease in testosterone, a drop in DHT levels, which is the most powerful estrogen, obviously. But some studies also show a mixed response, right? And the reason for that is because there are too many confounding factors, right? People that eat a lot of soy, right? So it really depends. The science is not conclusive,